Okay, so this is our buddy Dr. Berg, and we talked about this clip with Georgie, but we just wanted to expand on it maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, I think we just got maybe 10 seconds in and just got the
Okay.
idea of serotonin. But I wanted to get into some details that he describes as far as all the benefits of serotonin, what happens when your serotonin's low, and all the things we can do to increase our serotonin.
Got it. Okay, tell me when you want me to pause, Jay.
Let's talk about how to boost serotonin, the happy hormone. What is serotonin and what does it do? Well, it's a hormone. A hormone is a communication that travels through the body. And serotonin is made by your brain, it's made by your gut, and it contributes to feelings of happiness. It helps raise your mood. It helps make you calm. It decreases cravings for carbs. It helps you focus, and it reduces anxiety. Now, if you're deficient in serotonin, your mood might be suppressed, okay? You may have depression. You may have anxiety. You may be irritable. You may even have a worsened self-esteem, sleeping problems, and even memory loss.
Go for it,
Go ahead,
Mike.
Jay.
Okay.
You got it.
Yeah, so I mean, even in the mainstream, there are some major papers that have come out and actually gotten a bit of publicity. Obviously, it's not going to change what what you're going to hear on like a talk show, but the idea that serotonin is the happy hormone, was never supported by the literature. Like never, has never supported the idea that increased serotonin in the brain is beneficial, or that it was the happy hormone, or that depression was just caused by low serotonin. This was all marketing as a way to sell medications, but it's been known because there was prior to the SSRIs, which increased serotonin, serotonin lowering drugs had been used for depression, and a number of other things that'll adjust other neurotransmitters in rather complex ways. And the idea that there's ever been a clear chemical imbalance theory of depression has never been supported by the literature. That's always been just a figment of marketing and industry. But so this idea that he's purveying here is a common one, but is not at all supported and not at all accurate. And pretty much everything that he says that serotonin does, it does the opposite of. And everything he says that a serotonin deficiency does is the opposite, is actually caused by serotonin excess. So he mentions lowered mood, depression, anxiety, irritability. These things are all pretty well tied with serotonin as something that increases aggression and lowers mood and drives more of a hibernation state. It also directly interferes with mitochondrial respiration, with their metabolic processes. And this is shown to happen in the brain in response to SSRIs as well. And yeah, it does the opposite as far as helping mood, happiness, anxiety. It does have a numbing effect, which you could say can help mood if someone's mood is very low, but it's not actually the happy hormone. And much of the other things that he goes on to suggest are all just kind of some surface level connections, or kind of like backward, top down sort of ways of interpreting based on this faulty place, which is that serotonin is the happy hormone, which again is not founded in any way. Like I wrote an article on depression and concerns with SSRIs, and I was so surprised. Normally when looking at these things from our perspective, the literature is not, like, we're not necessarily in agreement with the majority of the literature. We have different interpretations. There's a lot of literature that supports our view as well, but it's more nuanced. With serotonin and SSRIs and the serotonin being the happy hormone, it was not that way at all. I mean, there's like everything was saying this is everything you're hearing in the marketing, in the in the news, in the media, has nothing to do with the actual physiology.
What's the tineptipine? What's the drug, the serotonin lowering drug that's useful for depression? And I know there's a few of them. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mirtazapine?
No, it's a different. It starts with a T.
Tineptine?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. But anyways,
Yeah,
I mean, that just shows how muddled things are, that there are drugs that lower serotonin that are also useful.
Well, and that's actually one of the problems with the serotonin research, is that they use drugs so the way they determine the effects of serotonin in a lot of the studies is they'll use a drug that will have some pro-serotonin or some pro-serotonin properties, or they have drugs that'll block serotonin, and then they'll see the effects. But the problem in doing that is that a lot of those drugs have a variety of other effects besides modulating serotonin. So it's hard to say this was just because of serotonin. So that's one of the biggest criticisms of the serotonin research, is the lack of understanding of like what is the pleiotropic or these off-target effects that are outside of the serotonin modulation. And a lot of the serotonin drugs, the serotonergic drugs, are mixed bags. Like some receptors they have affinity for, and then other receptors they don't have affinity for, and they're antagonist or inverse agonist or things like this that will alter the effect across the board. So the research is muddled through the use of those drugs, and then it's hard to make claims about the effect of the drug in these particular circumstances, because you have to look at like what the full profile of what it's doing is. Like a lot of the drugs that they use now have effects at norepinephrine or some of the catecholinergic signaling pathways. They have effects at the acetylcholinergic or the histaminergic or the dopaminergic pathways or some of them even directly lower stress hormones like cortisol. And some of the previous targets for depression, like at one point there was talk of using androgens for depression. I think proviron was more effective than amitriptyline. And you have drugs lowering cortisol, and you have pro-dopaminergic drugs, then you have T3 as an adjunct or thyroid hormone as an adjunct for intractable depression. So it's the like number one, all the neurotransmitters are working together in a consort, and they're also signaling different contexts. And then number two, like just looking at one and saying, oh, is this one thing? And you're just deficient in serotonin, and that's the argument is like a really tenuous argument. Like there's not, that argument is not supported at all. And I think that's what you're getting at, Jay, with when you're going through the research. And even worse than that is that there's papers out there that are talking about serotonin worsening these things. And even in the mainstream research, you see a deviation between central serotonin in portions of the brain, like the RAF neurons, and then you also see the problems with peripheral serotonin. So in the brain now, the argument is that serotonin is not so bad, but in the periphery, which the vast majority of serotonin that you produce comes from your gut, is peripherally produced, is highly problematic. And in some of the papers, one of the papers, they actually call serotonin the energy saving hormone. And they're basically talking about using drugs that block peripheral serotonin. And I think it's tryptophan hydroxylase 1, which is the enzyme that produces the peripheral serotonin. They're talking about using drugs to block that to decrease diabetes, decrease obesity, and decrease insulin resistance. So when you have someone coming on here and saying, oh, serotonin is blanket good, that first premise is incorrect. It's not blanket good. It's arguably blanket bad, except maybe there's some circumstances where, like, for example, and we could talk about this, in the brain, when you have a release of serotonin from certain neurons, it basically signals satiety. So it's like you ate food and your body is satiated. And so in those circumstances, like understanding what's going on in these particular areas is really important, because in this one particular area of the brain, you have this release of this neurotransmitter signaling satiety that doesn't say anything about the systemic serotonergic state of the body overall. And so it's really important to get into those nuances in the context to understand what exactly is going on before you just start blanketly saying serotonin is good. And the other thing I want to mention before we get into Dr. Berg's stuff here is a lot of the things that he's going to recommend to blanketly increase serotonin don't differentiate between increasing it centrally or peripherally or anything along those lines, and will most likely increase it peripherally more so than centrally, causing a ton of problems. And again, the idea that central serotonin is good is still tenuous, because it really depends on what area of the brain you're looking at, what the effect is. And in general, it seems to be a relatively negative thing. And it's elevated in states where, like, for example, like you're seeing it elevate in certain states for stress or whatnot as well. So it's, and the other thing too is even in some states where you see that it's positive, like for example, we talk about the massage stuff. The massage may increase serotonin, but it also lowers cortisol and increases dopamine. And so you're looking at ratios between these things as well become important when we talk about exercise or the central fatigue hypothesis or some of these different components. It's, again, like it's not just serotonin. There's multiple things going on, and just seeing up or down doesn't really give you the full picture.
And just to clarify, the differentiation is important, or the specifics, the unique details make a difference. But also, as you're saying, in general, the idea that low serotonin, even centrally in the brain, causes low mood and causes depression, and high serotonin reverses that, is not supported. So even if there is a distinction there, which of course there is, and just like any other hormone, there is use for it, like everything has its place. That doesn't mean we want to be increasing it. It doesn't mean low amounts are a problem or a cause. And there's a number of examples of this. We can look at SSRIs being ineffective versus placebos. You can also look at the numerous side effects of SSRIs in terms of weight gain, in terms of destroying libido, to then suggest that we should be increasing serotonin in the face of all that literature and all those concerns. I mean, I obviously we're saying that we don't agree with it, but I think even that is looking at the side effects of SSRIs as the effect that you're trying to get here is maybe a clear way to see that, or to put this idea into question, I guess.
Yeah. And that, again, it's not to say that people shouldn't seek help or treatment for depression or anxiety or things along those lines. It's just perhaps there's other strategies that would be effective and possibly not come with this like bag of really terrible side effects that would be worthwhile to look into. That's the perspective. Mm-hmm. And again, like the thing is like, how is something working? If you're taking an SSRI and it's blanketly lowering basically your emotional responses, basically just depressing the whole system, just bringing all the things down, and like, is that really a solution versus actually basically being able to live and enjoy life again? And I think there's a lot of problems with the mechanisms and the way that these things are working, and then like what's determined as this is useful or this is not. And then even when they start to talk about mechanisms, like the idea is talking about, like, for example, SSRIs depleting serotonin in the long run, or SSRIs adjusting other neurosteroids and things like that. So again, it's not to say that these are good things to use, but it's more to say that there could be other mechanisms describing some of the benefits of these things if there is some benefit shown, because a lot of them don't actually show that drastic or significant of a benefit in the studies.
Fantastic stuff, guys. Let's get through Dr. Berg's video here.
Boost your serotonin. Number one, L-tryptophan. It's an amino acid, non-toxic. It converts to serotonin, and it can help build up your serotonin levels. Now, just make sure if you're taking L-tryptophan, make sure you take it on an empty stomach. L-tryptophan also helps you with sleep, so I would recommend taking it right before you go to bed on an empty stomach, because if you take it with protein, the other protein will compete with the tryptophan and it won't go in, so it'll be kind of like a waste of taking tryptophan. Number two, exercise. Exercise helps the conversion going from tryptophan to serotonin, okay? Number three, sun and vitamin D. Vitamin D not only is necessary for making serotonin, but also to help convert tryptophan to serotonin. And this is probably why vitamin D has antidepressive properties. All right,
very skeptical of that claim.
For probiotics, well, your gut makes serotonin, a lot of it. And there's a huge relationship between what's going on in your gut and what's going on in your head. But probiotics can help increase tryptophan, especially like kimchi, sauerkraut. These are fermented vegetables, and maybe even kefir or other probiotic type supplements. All right, number five, massage also increases serotonin and decreases cortisol. And just so you know, anything that raises cortisol will inhibit serotonin, so you have to keep your stress as low as you can. All right, number six, surprise, fasting. Fasting significantly increases serotonin. This is probably why people that do fasting are no longer depressed. All right, thanks for watching.
He's not wrong about a lot of the things he said, but just if you recontextualize them, they're not good things. You know?
Right. Well, totally. And one of the biggest things he said there that I do think is inaccurate is this idea that cortisol and serotonin are antagonistic.
Yeah.
Whereas instead, you can see pretty directly that serotonin stimulates the production of cortisol and goes hand in hand with cortisol production, which you see in a number of the different examples he put out, like fasting. And we'll talk about, I mean, there's obviously some direct gut effects there, gut irritation and whatnot that leads to increases in serotonin, but also exercise, where just looking at, just using this idea that we know exercise is beneficial, so anything that exercise increases is good. I mean, one of the main things there is going to be cortisol. And again, serotonin goes hand in hand with that. And Mike, you were talking about the central fatigue. Was it the central fatigue hypothesis being involved there?
Yeah.
But also showing some clear connections where serotonin elevates as glycogen levels fall, essentially, like as our energy stores fall, serotonin increases as a way to reprioritize the distribution of nutrients. And then as soon as you recover, in the recovery process, your serotonin decreases. So essentially, it goes hand in hand with the stress. And as you reverse the stress, the serotonin goes down. So again, you can draw these connections, and we don't have to go through each one that he goes through, but in general, while we think exercise can be beneficial, just because that's the case doesn't mean that the serotonin that increases as a result of the stress that you could get from exercise, that doesn't mean that that's a good thing. Same thing with fasting, as I'm sure we'll get to. But anyway, go ahead and
this is like the type of massage that increases serotonin is like painful Thai massage, like, where they're trying to like break your bones while they're giving you the massage. So that he's right on that as well.
Sure, yeah.
Mike, what were you gonna say?
Again, so say we're functioning under the mainstream's idea, right? So say we're not even talking about a bioenergetic idea. Say the premise here is that serotonin in the brain is good, but peripheral serotonin is possibly problematic. Even in that frame, these things don't make sense. For example, if you're taking supplementary tryptophan, you're likely going to increase your peripheral serotonin. Same thing with probiotics and serotonin, same thing with exercise. And then even worse is the hypothesis for fatigue, as we talked about, the central fatigue hypothesis, involves an increase in serotonin and a decrease in dopamine, which is driving fatigue across the body. So for a lot of these things, and even with fasting, the idea that elevating serotonin is a good thing, it's literally saying here that it's elevated through energy saving mechanisms. So it across the board, like elevating serotonin through these mechanisms, even if you function outside of the bioenergetic paradigm or the views that we're discussing here, still it's hard to argue that these are good things, especially because the current research inside the mainstream paradigm would argue against these as being ideal things based on the mechanisms that he's mentioning here in terms of just blanketly increasing serotonin. So this video is kind of ridiculous because the entire premise is off. So the first starting point of the video is, okay, serotonin is good. If you accept that, then yeah, maybe these things start to make sense. But then when you start going through them individually, you're like, there's actually, why is exercise increasing serotonin? They're saying that that's driving fatigue and that being a good thing. Like even if you go point by point, it doesn't make any sense. So I don't know. This video to me is the initial premise is wrong, and then the mechanisms going through things and then arguing that it's good is also wrong for each of those components. And I don't know. I know you guys don't want to go point by point, but that's from my perspective. That's what I'm seeing. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and one point I did want to mention, because I know you had mentioned it, Danny, is in terms of the vitamin D, typically the stress version of vitamin D, the 125 hydroxy, is the one that has the effect of increasing serotonin along with a number of other stress effects. And you really only produce that when there's stress going on, whether it's due to infection, due to stress at the kidneys, parathyroid hormone production, things like that. So just saying that that is the same as vitamin D from the sun or from a vitamin D3 supplement is totally missing what's actually going on. So yeah, I mean, as you were saying, Mike, I don't know if it makes sense to go through it any deeper than that, but if you do, like, we've kind of mentioned some brief points with each of these, and as you're saying, if you do actually look at the mechanisms here, it doesn't support that the things that are beneficial increase serotonin. It's the opposite.
Yeah, and you don't want to increase gut-derived serotonin. So you have to come up with an argument that says that gut-derived serotonin is a good thing, which we know that it's not, even in the mainstream model. So then you have to then readjust, like, okay, what is the actual benefit of vitamin D or exercise or these different components, massages or fasting, if we know that elevating gut-derived serotonin is a problem? Like, if you're seeing that this is a problem and you're seeing these things are elevating it, then you can't say that those are the mechanisms that there's a benefit. So that's something that is, like, again, even in his perspective, or even in this mainstream perspective at least, it doesn't make any sense when you start to go through the literature.
Kimchi with udo's oil on it, though, is pretty good. So I'm just trying to throw that out there. It's pretty good. Anything else?
You got to send Eric Berg a message about that.
Anything? Oh, you can do product affiliation before it.
That's like the anti-carrot salad, right? It's like kimchi. Instead of your coconut oil or olive oil with your carrot and some vinegar and salt, you have kimchi and like these really unsaturated seed oils.
Like hemp seed oil or something. That's golden.
If you enjoyed that clip, you'll definitely want to download the free Energy Balance Food Guide. The Energy Balance Food Guide will help you determine exactly what to eat to optimally support your metabolism and help you lose weight, improve your digestion, get amazing sleep, boost your energy, and so much more. The Food Guide makes it extremely easy to get started with a bioenergetic approach to optimizing your health. So head over to jfeldmanwellness.com/guide to download your free Energy Balance Food Guide.